This is, I believe, part 3 of the NPC experiments, where I show you probably the absolutely wrong way to do stuff, but perhaps you'll be entertained anyway. So last time we had our NPC here, he was going forwards towards the target even, but he was not respecting terrain at all. So what we do for that is we add a raycast, which is just a way of finding, you give it a point, which is its origin, and you tell it what direction to look, and it tells you how far until it hits something in that direction. So I have a raycast source on him now, which is right up here above his head, and I have the raycast direction set to look straight down, and I set the NPC model itself to ignore raycast, which is why you can see my laser go straight through him now, and that is just so the raycast that the NPC is using to look down at the ground does not hit himself, because otherwise that complicates things. And the logics is completely separate from the walking logics, actually. It does not have to be linked up at all. All the logic says is that, let me back up enough so you can see here. Actually, manual camera. Close enough. So all the logic says is, on update, we do a raycast looking straight down at the ground, distance of 5 meters, and if the raycast hits something, we take the hit point, do the NPC's position in global coordinates, because we're raycasting in global coordinates too. So we'll just do everything global so that we don't get confused doing coordinate system transforms. We take the Y position where the ground was located. We take the X and the Z from the NPC. We pack, X and Z from NPC and Y from raycast, so that's where it hit the ground, and do a set global position on the NPC. So basically all that says is that on every update, look straight down and set the NPC's position to the height of the ground. And that does not have to be hooked up to any other logics at all. It operates independently, and you can observe that it works, assuming that it does, which it should, because it did before. Oops, I have to do a deselect all first. That's one for the blooper reel. See, what happened right there was that the raycast hit those widgets because the NPC was selected, and because it hit the widgets, it tried to stand on top of them, but they went up, and he went up, and now the NPC has gone into orbit. I forgot about that because that was something I fixed in a later revision. Okay, if I do a deselect all, and then, well, now as soon as I select walking, the things get selected again. Now I'll turn walking on. There he goes. Oops, looks like the raycast still has a debug on it, so you can see the yellow line. And this one has a little bug in his direction code, which is why he's not walking straight at the target. But there he goes, up the hill. Up the hill, and back down the hill. So that is all you need to do to get your NPC to respect the terrain. So walk to target, follow terrain. It's not too complicated. Not yet. Now this does have a problem in that he will walk on top of everything, whether it's terrain or not. Let me switch you back to third person here. So if I stand in the way of the NPC, he'll probably, he'll walk right on top of me, which is, not necessarily a desirable thing. So I'll show you how to fix that and how to fix the problem with the widgets too. Just a second, let me show you first what happens when he gets to the target without fixing that. He's just kind of dancing around on top of the target because that's what the raycast says. It says stand on top of everything. Pop. Or hop. Hop, I guess. Seems so happy that the target has been located. Alright, let's fix that. Okay, here's a version of the NPC that has some fixes applied. You can see he's getting a little more complicated too. There's buttons on his back to make him walk and reset position. But let me show you the logics first. It's just a small change, and then I'll show how it works. If I go over here, so the change here is that it's almost the same, but when the raycast happens, we get the slot that it hit, and the object root of that slot, and the tag of that object root, and we see if it's tagged ground. And if it's tagged ground, we set the NPC to that position. If it's not tagged ground, the NPC will ignore it. So now anything that you want the NPC to walk on will have to be tagged with ground. Anything that isn't tagged ground will simply be ignored. So I can go over here now, and I don't have to open the inspector to tell him to walk. I can just hit this checkbox now. And you can see that he didn't try to hop on top of those widgets there, but he's still respecting the ground because this thing here has a tag of ground on it. But he won't walk on top of me, and he won't walk on top of the target when he gets to it. He'll just kind of get there and dance in place, which makes it a little hard to hit the stop checkbox, but that's okay. We can just move his target. So that is basically it for the terrain following. Next thing I shall demonstrate by placing, I mean, I'm sure you can guess this, but if I place like a wall here, which I should probably, color with bricks or something, but for quick demonstration purposes, that's hardly relevant. Let's say we have a nice big wall, and we tell the NPC to come over here through the wall. As you can guess, he's just going to walk straight through it. So the next thing I'd like to do is have some sort of very simple obstacle avoidance such that NPCs will not walk through obstacles. Okay, since the next update that I have, which is going to be an attempt at collision avoidance, I know is going to be rather complicated, I figure I'd just show two simple refinements to the NPC here. One of them is that in addition to the NPC rotating to face its target, its head also looks up or down to face the target. So that is just a second look at component on the head of the NPC, but I think that having that there adds a fair bit of liveliness to it. It's actually looking at your target point. Now, depending on what you're doing, that might not be a desirable thing, but for this testing, it's nice to have it actually looking at the target. And the second refinement is I added a thing here that says it stops walking when it gets within 1 meter of the target. So I'll hit walk, going to the target, and it stops when it gets there, instead of dancing on top of the target like it was doing before. In a slightly newer revision of this, where I was starting to work on the obstacle avoidance, I actually have it flashing green when it gets to the target to say, like, hey, I have arrived. But this one, it just stops when it gets close. Now, the looking at the target was done simply with a look at component on the head. There is no logics for that at all. And the stopping when you get to the target is a pretty simple bit of code, so I will show you that, and then I will actually be done with this section of the video. So the logics to stop walking when you hit the target is actually in two separate pieces. They are packed into separate logics functions. There's one here that says take the position of the NPC, the position of the target, look at their XY only, we ignore the vertical, and we calculate distance only on the XY plane. Distance stores that in this value field. And the second bit of logics up here looks at the stored distance in the value field, looks at our setting for how close we should get before we stop. If our current distance is less than or equal to our stop distance, when that's true, it writes false into the walking value field. So if we are within 1 meter of the target, stop walking. That is simple enough.